morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening from, and welcome to 1% Better, where we take a look at hidden stories in sport. I'm Xylon, and I'm joined by Dr. David Lipman. Your medical question today is, do adults or babies have more bones?
Adults. You haven't asked me this question. I know you're worried about that. You certainly haven't asked that question before. Adults have more bones because a lot of kids' stuff is cartilaginous, and then it slowly ossifies into bones. Although, if you're going to say that they do, it's because the bones haven't joined yet. Yeah,
Yeah.
the bones haven't joined up yet. So what happens is you end up with these ossification centers that are joined by cartilage, and then the cartilage proliferates and turns into bone over a period of time. This is what people often call a growth plate. It's because you have this cartilage, and that's why when you fracture through a growth plate, it can arrest the growth, and you can end up with like one short limb or something like that. So it's, when people hear about growth plates, that's kind of what it is. So it's a technicality in that they are not the same bone yet, but there's also some bones that don't exist at all as bone in children that then become bone in like adults. So I call it a technicality, mate.
The answer I have is that the babies are born with 270 bones, which fuse into 206 bones in adulthood. But I think it is exactly what they're classifying it as bones, but it might not be classified as bones yet.
Yeah, it depends on how you think about it. Like, is two ends of one bone that have cartilage between them, and are going to end up as one bone? Is that one bone or is that two bones? Right. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. But there are certainly also some bones that don't exist in a child. That, like, if you look at kids' feet, there are some bones that don't exist. That's why kids' feet are so flat.
Listen, you can take your answer to the court of arbitration, and they can decide what the technicality and the legalities
Yeah. I'm
of.
sure Sam Altman cares what I have to say.
If you're new to this podcast, we'd ask you to please subscribe and share this episode with a friend. If you're new, your mind's about to be blown. We are really, really good at what we do, so you might as well just subscribe now. We're so good, we even have sponsors. Like, we're supported by Precision Fuel and Hydration on this podcast. By the way, go and check out their Instagram page. They have released some case studies from Western states. They look at a lot to bring to one of the athletes. Really interesting because they look at like what the maximum temperatures were, how they fueled, how many aid stations they had, how they prepared for it with their crew. I love the content they do around those events, man.
It doesn't sound like a lot to go like, oh, what did you eat between last aid station and this aid station? But I think people misunderstand the level of depth they're going through. They will do things like take out the soft flask. Say you had a carb drink mix. They'll take that soft flask and weigh it and work out how much fluid you didn't drink from it. So, okay, you're meant to drink 60 grams, but you only drank 55 grams. Similarly, they'll weigh the gel packets and work out how much gel was left in. Like, it's crazy. So, I mean, if you're doing this for yourself, trying to work out what you took and how to do it, the easy way is to keep the wrappers. So, right, I took 10 gels because I had 10 gel wrappers. Okay, that's a pretty good way to do it. It's often what I do when I'm recording or recounting things. Because you have a plan and then you have to adapt that plan as you go, right? Or you should anyway. Sometimes it goes to plan, sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, these are a lot of work to do that and then review it afterwards, especially on 100 miles, right? These are basically the best part of 15 to 20 hours worth of work in terms of fueling at different aid stations. And Western states, because of the way it's crewed, you basically have two crews that bunny hop each other. So they alternate. So you'll go like first, third, whatever, fifth aid station. So you have to do that, but then collect two groups and, it's crazy. So shout out to Precision for doing all that case studies. I think there's a lot to learn for people there. And probably the takeaway for people is I would go chase a couple of, say, people that have more than one case study. So for listeners, go look at somebody who's got more than one case study and look at how they're different for different events. Because you can go, and we've talked about this quite a bit on the podcast before, but in hotter weather, you may actually collapse some of your fueling and fluid and hydration together. So you might drink some carbohydrates, whereas on colder races, because you're not going to be as thirsty and because you don't need to intake as much fluid, you may separate them. So on a cold race, you might go water with gels or chews. But then on a hot race, you may do gels plus carb drink mix plus some water, right? So you sort of mix it up like that. And I'd be open to that. I spoke to a friend over the weekend who ran the Gold Coast Marathon, and she was like, I had to stop for a toilet break. And I was like, oh, maybe you drank a bit much. She's like, well, I was using carb drink mix. I find that way better than just gels. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting to think about that. So then how do you balance that, right? So balancing intake, because, going to the toilet doesn't mean you've drunk too much. It could, It doesn't necessarily mean that, but it's not ideal for running fast. Let's put it that way.
I was actually, we'll talk about it a little more. I've just been at the Tour de France and I had the opportunity to have a couple of dinners with Chris Froome, and he was talking about the different fueling intakes he had in his career. But what he was really interested in was the lactate thing. But we'll get to that in a second. But if you'd like to check Precision Fuel and Hydration out, we do have a discount code for you, 15% off on your first purchase, better2026. We also have a link in the show notes down below, which will apply that directly to you. And if you would like to become educated on fueling and how to fuel for your next event, you can book a call with one of the experts, totally free. We also have a link in the show notes to their calendar and availability down below. By the way, I did say check out Precision Instagram page earlier, like a boomer. It's not Instagram page. Just check out the Instagram, man. Just check them out.
What do you, mate? You're scrambled this morning. You've been at the Tour de France. Let's talk about it. All I know, so this is what I've gotten so far. Last year, you went to the Tour de France. I took you kindly to the Tour de France. This year, you go to the Tour de France. You're hanging out with Chris Froome. Now you're a luxury hotel that you own. And I've gotten 0 invites. After last year, I took you and housed you for a period of time. And you're coming back this year to stay with me. So all of this goodwill I give you, and I get nothing, mate. What's the story?
I am recording this from Rocacorba Cycling, just outside of Girona, the boutique cycling hotel that Ashley Moorman Passio owns. And we've been spending...
Hang on. No. You're a part owner as well. Don't get us... Don't divert this, mate. You're a part owner of a luxury cycling hotel.
Listen, let's move on. I was at the Tour de France, yes, and there with Ashley. We were invited by one of the main partners at the tour, Skoda, and Chris Froome is an ambassador. So it was really cool to spend the last few days with him. I must say he was really interested in this lactate thing and where people are using lactate as fuel now. It was one of the biggest talking points around the race, around the team. So I've been directing people to go check out the episode series we did with Ato Verbier. It might educate them a little bit more on it, but it's all the rage at the moment. It's crazy.
Well, it's his company. From lap to field, he's been interviewed for Velo Outside, all that sort of stuff. So it's really cool to see that being taken off. I mean, Tadej Pogacar was quoted, Jeroen Swart was quoted. It's like they're using it. I know a few of the other teams are using it. It's a big deal.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But on a exercise level, this has been the first big test for me with my back. It's the first overseas trip I've had post-spinal fusion, L5S1 spinal fusion 5.5 months ago. And I'm super impressed with how the back is handling it, man. I was a little worried on the plane and all that, but the back is amazing. So surgery is going well. One thing, though, is that I have to do my exercises and I have to do my strength work and stretches.
That's how it works, mate. That is how it works.
Why? I feel so much better, so much more put together, whereas I can feel inflammation a bit from the stress of the travel if I don't do those things. The moment I do it, I'm solid.
There's a couple of things. I think part of it's just motion is lotion and movement is helpful to pretty much everything all the time, almost certainly. There's a couple of situations where maybe that's not the case, but generally I would say more is some is better than nothing. So that's part of it. I think there's also the exercises send descending inhibition signals for pain. So they actually they have an analgesic effect. And so particularly with back pain, particularly lower back pain, there's good evidence to show that, you're better off doing something rather than doing nothing. So if you have an acute back pain flare, doing something within the realms of comfort is really important. So it might be walking or something like that, but that's generally helpful compared to doing absolutely nothing. So, I think there's a lot of stuff going on. I think that's part of it. I also think for you, finding 10, 15, 30 minutes out of the day to spend some time on you is helpful because you get so busy on these tours because, you're busy rubbing elbows with, professional cyclists and Grand Tour winners. So, I think that's part of it as well because you are very good in crowds, but you also get drained by it. So I think that's another portion of it for you in there.
I've been doing that in the gym room here, and Ashley's been on the indoor trainer at the same time in the mornings. So I feel like a pro athlete training next to a pro athlete. But you know what I wanted to tell you is I discovered that there are so many levels to this game. And let me explain what I mean by that. So I was at the tour with Ashley Moolman, the most successful female cyclist ever to come from Africa. I was there with Scarborough Grumet, the first Ethiopian to ride the Tour de France. When Alberto Contador arrived at the hotel, they were fangirling so hard. I had to go fetch Alberto and say, "Habla inglés." He's like, "A little bit." I was like, "These two want to say hello to you." They both Tour de France finishes. They have reached the heights of their careers, and they are so inspired by you. And then they went and told Alberto how much they are inspired by him. And then I bumped into an old colleague of ours, Bobby Julik, who's a former podium finisher at the Tour de France and an Olympic medalist. And he's this guy who's achieved all these big things. But Miguel Indurain was there in hospitality with us. And Miguel is who Bobby looked up to. And Bobby was barely stumbling over the little bit of Spanish he knows, telling Miguel what a hero you are to me. And I was just like, everyone has a hero. It's so funny, like how they're different level. I just want to know who sits at the top of that tree. Who's the person right at the top who doesn't have any heroes? Inspiration.
I think everyone has heroes. They just may not be from their sport, right? So like those people are all looking upwards in their sport. Someone like Eddie Merckx or whatever may not have had a cycling hero, but he would have a hero from somewhere else, some other sport, right? It's usually like, a team sport or whatever. And so I think some of that's country dependent, right? Like I think most Americans would get a little bit starstruck by someone like Michael Jordan or LeBron James, regardless of what sport they played or how good they were. Most French people would get very starstruck meeting Kylian Mbappe, for instance, even if you're a cyclist. So I think you may not look directly vertical, but you're looking diagonally or something like that, or out of your sport at something else.
It was funny. We spoke on Miguel Indurain's resting heart rate recorded as 28 on a couple of episodes ago. And that question actually came up at one of the dinners at the Q&A. And Chris was sitting next to me and the moderator asked Chris, what was your resting heart rate? And his was also like 31, 32, like just insane. Crazy.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I would be surprised if there was anybody riding in the Tour de France who had a resting heart rate that was above like 40. That would be horrifically surprising to me when they're not sick. That is.
What's happening with you? You are still recording from your villa that you own in France. I heard you've been running with Marco Altini, a previous guest.
Yeah, it's a chalet, mate, but it's not a villa. But yes, yeah. So Marco came up. Marco visited. He was on the way through back to Amsterdam. Stopped by for some visiting. That guy is so fit. He trained up for the 100K del Pastore. Got sick. But he's just so fit still. He ran like 100 miles a week prior and was here and just we used to run together prior to him doing as much ultra training and prior to him changing his diet a bit and getting particularly fit. He was fit at the time, but he's getting much more fit now. And I was a lot fitter. I was in like 242 marathon shape. Maybe actually probably not at the time. It was probably more like 250. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. The point is I was fitter and he was less fit. So we were very close together. And now it's like chalk and cheese, man. He was just toweling me up. But no, it's good to spend some time with him. He's a lovely guy. So Ali, his wife, is also lovely. So yes, really nice time there. And then did a few bigger days. And then I did yesterday. It was the first day back running intervals. I did some uphill intervals with poles on the trail here, pretty steep. I did basically 3 intervals. They're about at 1.2 Ks up. So I did sort of 1.2 K up, a bit of a walk afterwards for about 80 seconds, then jog back down at so let's call it zone 1-2 effort, maybe zone 2 effort. So I did that up and back twice. And then the third one, I went and did an extra little jog out, another sort of, let's call it 700 meters total, and then went harder down. So like a moderate effort down. All of this, I sort of talked a little bit about a strategy going forward in a few weeks for when we released the periodization episode. I sort of talked about it there. But it was good. I felt really good about actually getting the heart rate really high for periods of time. I got it probably to what's close to a max now for me. Maybe not quite. Maybe it was a couple beats in there more I could have gotten out. But it was good. It was 182. Felt good. Pushed hard and just enjoyed being back to it, listening to some music, going for it. So Achilles held up well. So that's quite good. I mean, uphill stuff is always interesting because you go, there's a thought that it would actually put more strain on the Achilles, but because it's not all Achilles, some of it's the bursa and stuff, it seemed to hold up well. So there's obviously a footwear component to this. There's probably some other things as well. And, I probably wasn't in a great amount of dorsiflexion for a lot of it. So that was good.
It's nice that you aren't flying blind for something like this. We are advocates for Stryd running power meters. What does your data say on interval sessions like this?
Well, I mean, part of the thing, so I looked at a couple of things. So leg spring stiffness is a key one there when you think about tendons. And so it's a little bit hard to get a good leg spring stiffness insight because when I was doing these uphill intervals, some of it was running, some of it was like fast hiking because it was almost like micro intervals 1.2 Ks was taking me like 10 minutes. So you can't, it was too steep, and I was, running and jogging is too hard for me to go 10 minutes, right? It wasn't a 10-minute interval like that. It was more like 4 or 5 lesser intervals with sort of walk breaks between it. So if you look at, we can pop up my heart rate data, but you'll see that it's sort of a bit of a sawtooth pattern. Or in the heart rate, like I want to be careful because a sawtooth ECG means something else, or EKG means something else to people. But yeah, so there was a bit of a sawtooth pattern to the heart rate, and then when you look at the power data or look at leg spring stiffness data, it's a little bit hard because it's sort of on again, off again, so it's not great. My leg spring stiffness was good though, and certainly coming downhill was good. Especially on the last one when I went a bit harder. That's reassuring. And the big thing that I sort of want to do is push higher powers, because my power duration curve was very flat when we showed it a few weeks back. And this really, you can see here that will pop up on screen. You can see like what Stryd does is when you do a session that impacts your power duration curve. So when I guess new best powers for the last 90 days, it starts to impact it, and you can see it here in the purple. And you'll see that these 0 to 46 seconds is a new best. The 1 minute 15 to 2:38 was a new best, and then 3:22 to 4 minutes is a new best. So all of those sort of, let's call that VO2 max type duration, right? I don't like to use the VO2 max; it probably wasn't, but in that duration, short duration, anywhere from sprint duration to short duration was quite good, or at least was impactful here. So it's nice. It's good to see it looking like a curve again, because it was very flat. So yeah, now the question for me is like, what do I do with respect to Copenhagen half marathon in terms of footwear? So I'm gonna have a bit of a play there. I may end up throwing a heel raise into my my super shoes to see how that goes, which would make previous guest Michael Nitschke very, very happy. It's one of his favorite tricks to do. So we'll see.
If you'd like to check out Stryd running power meters, we do have a link in the show notes down below. That link is unique to us, and it lets them know it came from us. So that'll be very, very helpful. Should we get to some community shoutouts? Let's have a look to see what you have been up to recently.
Yeah, so Brett Goldfinch ran the Gold Coast Marathon. He was the 3:20 pacer, and he ran 3:19. So pretty much spot on. I'm sure he was 3:19 and change, so that's great work. Gold Coast is mostly flat. There's one little hill just at the start line. It's slightly different to when I ran it, but yeah, that was good. And it was a nice day there as well. So congratulations, Brett. Toby Schmidt, we've mentioned him a few times before. He got second at the Bernina Ultrax Marathon in 5 hours and 18 minutes. So that's a great effort. That's a huge result for him. He's been coming back off a bit of an injury. And then our Australian French consultant, Shane Evans, did Ultratel des Tours Rocher, the 22K, which had 1,000 meters of gain, and he went 1:57 there to get first in his age group. So congratulations there, Shane.
About 2 weeks ago, we had professional triathlete Christian Hugenhaug on the podcast just ahead of Challenge Roth, and I was following a bit on the weekend. Congratulations to Christian. He went 8th overall in 7:39. Oh, man, these guys are getting so quick.
It's crazy to think. I mean, it was a new fastest time, right? Sam Laidler went the fastest ever in iron distance or a full distance Ironman, whatever you want to call it. It's trademarks or whatever. But he set the new record, right? It's crazy to think that you get 8th going 7:30.
It's crazy. And then previous guest on this podcast, Eloise Delois, she did her first ever full Ironman distance in Ironman Turn, and she went 9:20, running a 3:05 there. Really, really good performance by her. She executed really well. We also got a comment in on Spotify from DJ AB at work. He said, awesome episode. You guys are rock stars for getting the men's Ironman champ onto the podcast, referring to Casper Stoynes, who was on last week. The Norwegian training trio is a dream. Hopefully Zai can get back to training and we can form our own trio, meaning with him and long-time listener Lister. By the way, you forgot to mention Challenge Roth as a weekend to watch. Suppose it clashes with Tour de France on Xylon's calendar. Hopefully he will race it one day and get a sound effect for mentioning it. Not likely, but you never know. You never know.
Yeah. Well, I watched Challenge Roth. So yeah, it was an interesting race. I felt a little bit sorry for people like Christian Hugenhaug because we just didn't see it. He got 8th and had a really good day and just was not a factor. It was crazy. So it was very clear that there was a group that were apparently set up by, I can't remember which the bike brand was, but the bike brand set up a WhatsApp group basically to beat Christian Blumenfeld, and they clearly worked together and did that. So it was quite interesting to watch that happen in the water and on the bike.
Would that have
And
been
then
Canyon if it's Sam
probably,
Laidlow?
yeah, I think it was because it was Sam Laidlow and a few other Canyon athletes. So it was quite interesting to see them do that, and then ultimately beat Christian, right? So like it obviously worked, and they were, and to Canyon's credit, Canyon wants them in front on the bike, and there was a group of them on the bike. So yeah, at one point I thought Christian was going to do it and pull it out and catch Sam Laidlow, but not quite. So yeah, let's see.
We also got a YouTube comment in referring to a conversation we had about 17-year-old Cooper Lutgenhouse and how he keeps impressing. Someone called Pat's Pigeonhole commented and said he is going into his senior year of high school this August. Diamond League announcer said he was 2 weeks out of high school, but that is not correct. He set the under 18 world record last summer between his sophomore and junior years. So, Pat, thanks so much for sending that in and correcting that for us. And then we also had a Spotify poll up.
Yeah,
The
this
question
is
was, how do you think about doping?
Yes, this is when we talked about like our Bayesian way of thinking about doping and sort of asking people how they thought about it. And the first option was assume they're all dirty, and no one's doing that, which is great. Clean until proven dirty was 20% of people, and then cynical but optimistic was 80% of people, which I think is probably reasonable. Probably reflects a broader community to think about, how people probably think about this. Many people are a little bit cynical about it, but again, we mentioned the lactate stuff, like that sort of stuff is good for the sport, and it's how we sort of keep innovating and keep improving. But it also makes it hard because we can point at that and say that might be a reason that people improve. Bicarb might be a reason people improve, and the criticism of that sort of reasoning is that it lets people who are doping potentially off, or it dismisses it. But they're all reasons. Like two things can be true. There can be improvement because of super shoes or bicarb or lactate or all of these things, and there can be improvement because of doping, and there can be improvement because of both. Right. So there's that. One thing I wanted to mention, we also got an email in from John Bernard Shaw. So I appreciate John sending the email in. It said, Xylon David, congratulations on your podcast. You cover an interesting range of topics. Thank you. As recently shown by Rachel Entrican in ultra running, after 200 miles, gender does not matter and women can outperform men. There are numerous theories as to how this is possible. Women have better pain management, women have better oxygenation rate, etc. Plenty of theories, but no definitive answers and very little research. Medical science has often made incorrect assumptions regarding women's health, such as only testing pharmaceuticals on men. Research into women could give new insights into human biology and lead to better medical outcomes. Would you consider doing a podcast on women in ultra running and asking for more research? Thank you for your consideration. So, firstly, John, definitely consider it. And like anybody who's keen to come on, any listeners know who's keen to come on that is an expert in women's ultra running, we're happy to hear them. Unfortunately, you make the good point that women have been overlooked in research to some degree for a period of time. Now, I actually wrote a newsletter article on this a little while ago, where I looked at why women are underrepresented in research and some of the factors that play into it. And like the sort of headline is, part of it's difficult. You have to control for menstrual cycle and all these things, but that's a little bit of a cop out. Part of that's a funding issue as well, because you have to actually track menstrual cycle, not just self-report. You have to measure it. So that's another challenge. But part of the issue is also like women volunteering for research. And there are lots of reasons that they may or may not, but they're certainly speaking to researchers. And in the paper, I gave some examples. Like they're not always as keen. And again, super reasonable reasons not to be. So this isn't pointing the finger, but it's hard. And so I say all that to say that I don't know of any of these researchers. And it's not through lack of seeking, because I would love to have these women's ultra running researchers on. I wanted to do an episode on post birth as well, because I think there's been an interesting pattern that I've observed of women as mothers performing arguably better than pre-motherhood. And I had someone lined up, and ultimately it fell through. So that's happened to us a couple of times on different things, and that's okay. Like people don't have to come on a podcast, and they don't have to, just because they say yes doesn't mean they have to appear. But what I'm saying is, these are some of the factors that go into us finding guests. So if you know somebody, please do let us know. Also, things like subscriptions and ratings of the podcast and sharing all helps, because the bigger we are, the more profile we have, and therefore the more likely we are to get better researchers on. So this is all that to say. But to specifically talk about the question, so John mentions that gender doesn't matter. I'm not convinced that it doesn't matter, but I think it becomes a lesser, when we think about it from a pure physiology standpoint, some of the physiological determinants of performance, the physiology becomes less of a factor and other things become better. As we said with Rachel Entrican, managing pain, managing problems, all this sort of stuff. So I think that's, it's not that it doesn't become a factor. I think it's less of a factor for sure. certainly better pain management or certainly better pain tolerance, I would agree with, is part of potentially
Women are
why.
just so much better at managing pain.
Yeah,
Men, babies.
no question. I also think pacing, and we're going to talk a bit about pacing later. Oxygenation rate, I don't know as much about. Certainly, fat oxidation rates seem to be higher in women as well. So there's lots of things, and like most things, it's probably everything, not one thing, right? Like Kenyan runners are good for lots of reasons that are sociocultural as well as physiological, not just not just one physiological trait. But yeah, I also think that there's this. We're very quick to say that we've never done any testing on women, or we don't do enough testing on women, and it's true. But it's also worth remembering that women are humans too, right? So to assume that male research doesn't represent women is not fair. It may not represent women, and it may not be as representative or as relevant. But that's
Ah,
like
interesting. Oh.
so we know that's like saying that we've tested a group of people in America that doesn't apply to people in Africa. Could be true, could also not be true. And it's never binary. It's never this doesn't apply or we're dismissing this wholesale. It's well, this is indicative. We need more evidence and it's pointing at this. So let's like use that as a theory, right? This is why if you look at drug research, what they try and do is multi-center trials. So they'll get hospitals all over the world to do the same trial. So we have data across the world. So we're not seeing a bias because of money or because of a healthcare system or because of race or whatever else. So we certainly know that genetics and, particularly from a race perspective, play a role here for certain susceptibilities. And gender, I'm sure, does in some respects. But to assume that absolutely no research applies to women because they were historically excluded from research, I think is not quite fair. It's not quite correct either. And so I do think we need to do more in women. I would love to see it done. I'd love to be part of it. If I could help in any way, let me know. But it's not super, super easy. And I don't think we should be throwing things out wholesale. I also think that there's a nefarious thing happening in the world where we're using this as a marketing tool to get women to buy things as well. And so like, I don't want to say too much about that, but that is happening. I am seeing this happen. And so like, I'd be a bit aware of that.
Thanks for that email, John. We do have an email address where you can reach us. It's in the show notes down below. Shout out to one of our partners, Nomeo. Love seeing our partners' athletes doing well. Mads Pedersen won the stage at the Tour de
Yep.
France yesterday, as of the day of recording. And then also Jonas Schomburg came fifth at Challenge Roth in an absolutely stacked field.
Yeah, it was cool to see Jonas do this. Like there was, Jonas has come from short course and everyone was picking him as a bit of a dark horse. He did really well last year. They picked him as a bit of a dark horse. I know Gustav did on the podcast I did with him on the Norwegian method. Gustav Eden did. And so it was cool to see Jonas do so well. He was probably in the sort of podium position for a lot. Well, he was in the podium position for a good portion of the day, but ultimately got run out of it. But I think give him a year or two and his run will come up, particularly in the marathon distance, and he's going to be a real competitor here. He's super good swimmer, great cyclist. He just needs to get that run to sort of pick up a little bit, and he'll be doing really well there. We have had some people ask us about Australia because apparently this discount code isn't working. We have emailed Nomeo. They are getting back to us. They are going to work. It's probably going to be through AidStation if this happens. That the discount code will apply. So we will let you know. But if you're in Australia, thank you very much for your support. Thank you for your keenness. We are keen for you to get some Nomeo as well. We just have to work through this with Nomeo. And, if we need to extend the discount a little bit for Australia, we will do so. So really appreciate everybody there. We do have a discount. The code to use is what the number 1, then percent, the sign percent, and then Nomeo, all in capital letters, and then the number 20. If you want that is in the show notes, you can copy it across there. So we do appreciate you doing that. And for those who are interested in just supporting the podcast, whether you're buying or not, do follow the link in the show notes from us to let them know that you've come from us. Because again, this does help us get sponsors, keep sponsors, etc.
Okay, this is 1% Better, where we take a look at hidden stories in sport. Let's have a look and dive into some performances of late. Should we start with the Football World Cup?
Yeah. Have you been watching, mate? What have you been doing? You've been watching. You missed that game last night. That Argentina over Egypt was crazy.
Downside of traveling. It's the downside. I was following it on the Athletic app. Like when I was at a dinner, I was following the score and I just saw 2-0, 2-1, 2-2, 3-2. I was like, I should be in front of a television right now.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting to watch happen. I texted you afterwards. I was like, I wasn't that interested in the game. Like, what frustrates me is that you watch the game, and this is it is a feature of the sport, but it is for me a bug of the sport, which is that goals are too valuable because there's no incentive to attack. There's only incentive to prevent goals, and so it can be very defensive, particularly in knockout football. But as soon as Argentina is like, there's 20 minutes to go and Argentina are 2-0 down, they're like, all right, let's just attack, and then you're like, this is great. This is amazing to watch. So you just wish there was more of that. It's certainly an argument I've heard put forward for more African teams being there because that's generally more of the play style they use. So it was interesting, but it's been, there's been some interesting stuff happen off the field as well, of course, that people will, sort of kind of leave it be. But the things that have caught my eye, I saw a stat that Virgil van Dijk, the Dutch player, has played every minute for his club this year, and he played every minute for his country as well. Now, granted, they're out,
Incredible.
but that's crazy to think about from a physical ability standpoint. Like that is, we'll probably never see that again. Like that is,
He's a powerhouse. I'm not a fan because he plays for Liverpool. He's a Liverpool captain. I'm a big Man United fan, but I have to give him his props. He's a powerhouse, man. He's a unit.
yeah, it's pretty crazy to think that he's done that. I also noticed that like basically every coach who's been out a little bit early for their country has been fired or resigned, which is crazy. I hate that this is where we're at in sport. But it also is what it is. What I did notice, though, is Jurgen Klopp has been announced for Germany and Arne Slot's in discussions to go to the Netherlands. And there seems to be this movement from potentially club into country coaching, which I think is interesting because they're very different, right? That situation is completely different to do.
So much nicer managing a country from a lifestyle point of view.
Yeah, but also you can have less impact because you get players for less time. And is that what coaches want to do? And you don't necessarily get to build your squad necessarily the way you want to. So also they're very different roles. And I think, whether it's more so club, but certainly country, like I think stability is key. So if you've got a new manager every time you go to a World Cup, it's never going to be good. You need someone to build something over a period of time, particularly with young players. So yeah, that was interesting. And then, obviously the USA are out. I don't think too many people are surprised. There's been lots of memes floating around about the Belgians doing well. So it's cool to see that.
I don't know if they're out. I don't know. Trump could still pick up the phone, take the ball, leave World Cup ends.
You get to say that, mate, not me. But yeah, I was chatting to somebody that was saying in the US, they're like, it's so big over here. The World Cup has been so great. This is going to be great for US soccer. We're going to go on and do great things. And I'm not 100% sure this is the case. Like, it's a much less stochastic sport than things like the NFL or the NBA. It's much more continuous and fluid. And I think both viewing tendencies and then certainly and attention spans, and then certainly advertising is impacted by this, right? Everyone's been talking about the advertising breaks. They've called hydration breaks. And, I don't think this will necessarily be as big in the States, although, and then also 1994 World Cup did very little for US football or US soccer, whatever you want to call it.
You're the second person to say that now. We had an American guest staying here, and he went to one of the games. He'd never been to a football game before, and he went to one of the games before coming here. And he said the same thing. But it was my understanding that the US League, just gone blank, I can never remember.
MLS, Major League Soccer.
MLS came out of the 94 World Cup. Wasn't that as a result of the 94 World Cup? I mean, I agree now. I can't see much coming out of this World Cup for US.
So the MLS started, but until David Beckham went over to the MLS and got given part of a team, and until Lionel Messi did the same thing, the league was fine. Nothing much. Yeah. It's like saying the A-League started after whatever. It's like, you're like, what's the A-League? Yeah, it's the Australian Football League. Like, you know what I mean? So basically anybody who's good is playing outside of those leagues. So you need those leagues for people to develop and to create depth. But the reality of the situation is most people who are going to be at a good level are going to be playing out of the country. Like South Africa would be infinitely better at football and perform better if all of the players were foreign based.
Yeah, right.
So I cannot fathom places like South Africa, the USA, and Australia having leagues that are rival leagues. They'll all be departure leagues. People will leave those leagues to go to better leagues, right? And the reality is you want to be playing somewhere in Europe for the most part, or South America if you're an elite player. So that's going to be the case. Now, the league is important, and it's going to create pathways, and it's going to create a future for some people, and it's going to create depth. And those are all very important factors, right? But I do think that's the case. And so yeah, the MLS is part of it. But I also think
not that it can't be just for the sake of it. It's that to get to that level would take an enormous amount of investment and infrastructure and planning. It's certainly possible because if the sport is a fanatical sport, which let's use South Africa, football is, millions of people will support Orlando Pirates, Kaizer Chiefs, and build their lives around it, and their kids start playing football. And there are academies, but you would need to supersize it. It's something Morocco is doing now. So Morocco had the strategy to get the diaspora to play for the country. But to your point, all those players are playing internationally and they weren't born in Morocco. So that's why they're so good. But to capitalize on that and use that as inspiration, the King of Morocco has built this crazy academy where they want this to become a long-term thing, where they develop the athletes. But even probably to your point, most of those athletes will end up playing in Europe.
Yeah, but so to develop a league that's that good, you need multiple players, you need talent. Like, there's just no way that we're going to find like the pay to play second and third division or second and third level, whatever the names of those things are in the UK, for instance, is so high. It's going to be
Yeah,
very hard to pay people
you're
who are
right.
because effectively you need those people to be playing in your league rather than to be playing in the UK, right? And then there's always going to be
But
incentive like, what are you
a
going to go to?
com-
Are you going to go to South Africa or Australia to play, or are you going to stay in the UK because you can, because you'll still be close to family for the same money?
But one interesting point on that is I heard an interview with Steven Gerrard, and he obviously coached in Saudi Arabia until recently.
Mm-hmm.
And he was saying the top two, three clubs in Saudi Arabia could challenge in the chat, not challenge, could play comfortably in the Premier League. So that was interesting to hear. And
In the
obviously,
Premier League.
yeah. I was surprised at that. Like, I don't know if he's still under contract with them and they still paying him and he has to
Yeah,
say
yeah.
the right things.
But you also, I mean, the Eredivisie is a good example of this, the Dutch league, right? The top handful are very good and competitive in Europe. Below that, it's not even close.
Yeah.
Like, they're not
Yeah.
even competitive in the Dutch league that much. So the problem you need is you need all these players, and they need to be, and you need depth in each of these things. So you need many strong teams, right? Otherwise, because you're almost better off dispersing talent if you don't have much of it, right? So like in Australia, to say like, okay, let's put all the Socceroos in one team and then devastate the rest of Australia and New Zealand, like that doesn't help. You actually need to spread that talent and then bring everyone else up. So yeah, it's a wicked problem. So maybe this happens. I think perhaps the only other thing is like the interest in the Premier League seems to have gone up in America, and they got a good
Mm.
package to watch it. So there's certainly a bit of that. So maybe this generates it, and maybe some of the concerns around CTE and those sort of things in tackle football might be part of it. Although headering a football is not necessarily risk free either.
The Football World Cup has brought us some interesting discourse in the NFL world. What has that been?
So this is a little while ago. I was going to talk about this, one of our previous episodes, but I wanted to bring this up. So George Kittle, who's a tight end for the 49ers, one of the best in the league, has been particularly outspoken about this. Basically, the World Cup, he's saying that the World Cup's exposed the NFL's excuse for not switching to grass. The NFL has a bunch of turf, right? So varying levels of artificial turf. And there are some fields more than others, but certainly there are very few grass fields left, and people prefer grass because of injury risk, they say. And they say that people get injured on these artificial turf significantly more. So they see there's grass.
More
FIFA,
on the artificial turf.
yes,
Yeah.
because it doesn't give. So if you think about you put your foot in the ground and you get twisted, the grass will rip, turf won't.
Mhm.
So your knee
Mhm.
goes or your ankle goes. So we're seeing. So obviously FIFA has mandated grass for all the stadiums. So they put grass into these NFL stadiums. And so he's saying that injury risk is significant, and they should be putting grass in all NFL stadiums. The problem is you have to keep it in good shape across winter and those sort of things, which is quite hard. But he's
Mhm.
saying there's enough money to do it, and the rich owners don't want to do it, and they need to have get rid of the turf for injury risk reasons. So yeah, I
To your
haven't
mind,
seen.
does anyone play on grass in the NFL?
I think there's a couple of fields, but not many.
So there
I'm not
should
sure.
be, there's an opportunity to do some studies, to do case studies, surely then.
You assume that the NFL isn't run by the owners. So the thing with the NFL, it is the owners run the league. So there is the league owner. So the league commissioner works for the owners of all the teams,
I hear you.
and
I
those are
hear
some of
what
the
you're saying.
wealthiest men in the world, and women, but mostly men. And there's not a lot of incentive for them to do this research because they don't want any of that. This is the whole concussion movie with Will Smith. That was was talking about when CTE was early. The early discoveries of CTE in like 2005 in Pittsburgh, and so some of the stuff I don't know if it's suppressed, but certainly not encouraged. Right? They might not be pouring water on the flames, but they're not fanning the flames here. So I don't think the owners have got an appetite to do this research and therefore have to change all this sort of stuff.
Okay, let's move along. We've got so much more to get through, man. I didn't manage to catch the Prefontaine Classic. Did you catch it?
Yeah, I didn't want to go through everything here, but there's certainly some interesting stuff that I saw that I wanted to chat about. In the women's long jump, Larissa Iapicino, she jumped 7:12, I think on her second jump or her first jump, to break her mother's 28-year national record, which is super cool.
I would be
Um,
smack talking at the next Christmas dinner until the cows came home.
it was a bit out of left field. No one really expected it. Certainly she didn't. She was ecstatic, which is great. It was a huge jump. But then Tara Davis-Woodall, who we talked about previously, going back to some hurdling, came out and beat that jump on the next. She already jumped like 7:13, so 1 centimeter further on like the next jump, which is amazing to see, which is great, particularly given she's been doing hurdles. But it's interesting. The other thing I noticed was that like quite a few of the long jumpers, but certainly Iapicino was one of them, is sponsored by Diadora, the footwear company. And she's also a Red Bull athlete. So we're not talking about a slouch here. We're talking about somebody who's like top tier, but also sponsored by Diadora. So keep an eye on Diadora, particularly in the long jump, as sort of making a resurgence. Some of these lesser footwear brands are really making a push, and I think they're obviously doing good stuff. Like she wouldn't take a Diadora contract if the tech wasn't up to scratch, because she could basically probably sign with anybody, given she's a Red Bull athlete, right? So, yeah. And then in the men's 200, this was crazy. Tate Taylor, this high school kid, is 18, and he ran 1975 with a minus 0.9 wind. So it's into a headwind. So it's the fourth fastest time this year, and he only recently broke 20. So he beat Tabojo, who ran 1993.
Wow.
So just another young kid coming through who, much to Tabojo's chagrin, is not racing his own age group. And he was asked about that afterwards. And then, the two blue ribbon events, so the mile there, it's very classic, right? So in the men's mile, the blue ribbon event, Cam Myers, the Australian, won it. It's a huge area record. He ran 3:46, which was after a really good performance the week prior in the 1,500 meters as well. So he's rounding into some great form. So he beat Yared Nuguse in second, Ethan Strand in third, Tim Chariot in fourth, and Hobbs Kessler in fifth, all with PBs aside from Nuguse. So, listen, it's a mile. They don't run a lot of miles, but it was fast, and it was great to see Cam Myers do that. And we're going to talk about why that's relevant in a second. And then in the women's mile, Nikki Hiltz beat Faith Kipyegon, which was great. It was amazing to watch. They came into the final, and it's great. Go listen to Nikki's interview post-race. She was like, I thought I'd never get a chance to. She basically said, I wanted to test my kick against Faith's kick, but I never thought I'd be in a position to kick with her. She's usually hundreds of meters ahead of me by that stage, or tens of meters ahead of me at that stage. So it was cool to get to kick past her, and she's really well. Faith, second race of the year, hasn't done much, first track race, so she'll come into some form, but it was cool to see Nikki do that. And Jess Hull, the Australian, still not quite there. So we talked about this a few weeks ago. It was like maybe she's sort of peaked a bit early in the season and now is sort of going back to do some work. But I thought she might come back and do a little bit better here. So let's see. I mean, she's not far out of Commonwealth Games. So, and then, Ultimate Championships later in the year. So let's see what Jess is doing and how she goes. Maybe the change to more fast stuff to try and improve her kick has been a detriment to her.
Did they announce Yared Nuguse to London Diamond League?
Yeah, which is great because remember, Josh Kerr is doing the 222 project to try and break the world mile record. And someone like Yared Nuguse, who probably prefers, I mean, he does have a kick and he has surprised me a little bit with that, but he probably prefers a steadier, harder race versus, and certainly when you're comparing him to someone like Josh Kerr, I think that's really important because Josh Kerr is more of a sit and kick runner. Now, of course, if you want to run a world record, you don't sit and kick. You have to run it pretty hard from the start, but to have other races in the race, firstly, because I think competition's key is part of it, particularly for Josh Kerr because he's such a racer. But then moreover, I think to have someone who's going to run steady is helpful. And I'm pretty sure Cam Myers is going to be there as well. And again, Cam Myers is absolutely not scared of going off the front or leading it. He's been taking pace up post the paces dropping off as well. So I think if you've got those three, I think, I don't know if the world record is a chance or likely maybe, but, you're not going to have a chance without them. Let's put it that way.
And then speaking of race announcements, it looks like Valencia Marathon is going to be a fast one.
Yeah. So Kejelcha got announced a little while ago. We talked about that already. And, I sort of said after London, he's probably going to go back there. But John Korir was announced. John Korir won Boston a little while ago. He's very quick and he's looking very good. So I think this is exactly what we need. Again, we need races, right? This is part of why I think Berlin happened as it did, is you had a race on. And I think this is the same situation here. So I would not be surprised if they go sub 2 in Valencia. It would not surprise me in the slightest because the weather is almost certainly going to be good. They're going to have some people around them in each other, but certainly in probably some paces as well. They'll probably pay somebody because Valencia will want to be a sub 2 race. There's just
Oh.
no way that Valencia isn't paying people to try and pace them. Like,
Is it usually in September?
it's December.
Oh, December. Okay, so we have a while to go still.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So, I would say to them, listen, go find a training partner or two. Tell them we've got a paycheck for them. Get them to pace you. Let's do this.
And then do you want to touch on the Tour de France a bit that's happening? I want to say something, but I don't want to say it to you. I didn't say it to you earlier. Do you know that on Monday stage, we got offered, Ash and I, to go in the VIP helicopter in the race. And I said no, because I had 3 or 4 hectic days at the tour by then and just needed to leave to recover. It's also, I mean, an experience I have had before. But you're old when it's like, you're like, where are we landing? We're in Spain now, Barcelona. Where we land? Are we landing in France? How long? And then I have to figure out how long it's going to take me to get back here. I was talking to this about Maddie Nutt, the gravel racer. She won a tracker this year, the big one. And she was saying, yeah, you're getting old. Because in our 20s, we just would have been like, you don't ask questions. You're like, yes, I'm getting in that chopper. And then when you land, you're like, I'll figure out how to get back. In your 40s, you're like, logistics. How does logistics work?
I'm old, and I would have said yes. We're just not all. We don't all own luxury hotels and get all these experiences all the time, mate. So yeah, I would have said yes to that. So that's madness, mate. But yeah, let's talk about it. I mean, like some interesting stuff. So Tadej took yellow early, and certainly in that little sprint at the end, Jonas looked like he had nothing, and so that wasn't great. But then similarly, Tadej's never been further behind the yellow jersey than he is at the moment, with Uno X taking it yesterday in a great story. I don't know the kid's name, but cancer survivor, doing really well. So
Tristan Tron, I'm not sure if that's how you
Yeah.
pronounce it. Yeah.
Yeah, so really, I mean, that's a really cool story. And I texted Olav Alexander Boo, the director of performance there. I texted him yesterday, congratulations. So, I mean, Uno X is going strength to strength. They won a stage last year. This year they're doing, they've got a jersey for a good period of time. This kid also held a jersey for like 8 days in I think it was the
The
Giro.
Volta, I think
Or the
it was.
Volta. Okay,
Yeah.
so I mean that's really impressive stuff. So where are you at with all this?
I actually saw some emotion from Olaf Boo for the first time. He like reposted the yellow jersey and he just said no words. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I've ever seen him show emotion before. But it speaks to the work that they're doing there. Jonas took the yellow jersey on the first stage when Visma won the team time trial. And I asked Froome, would you want the jersey that early, like from day one? And he said, absolutely, because what it allows you to do is to sit in the front. The opening stages of the Tour de France are notoriously known for crashes because everyone's trying to be in the front. Everyone's got new, fast equipment, and the front is the safest place to be. But when you have the yellow jersey, you have a right to be in the front. And now you have teams like UAE, Visma, Decathlon, Little Trek. They all want to be in the front. Most of them have GC riders, and they sort of have a right to be in the front. But obviously, yellow jersey trumps everything. So that was interesting to see. And then that sprint you mentioned there, I wouldn't be too concerned if I was Jonas Vingegaard. I mean, he's just not that explosive on the shorter stuff. It's the reason why he doesn't do the classics like Boggy. He doesn't do Liège-Bastogne-Liège in those races because he's just not explosive. He rarely comes alive in the high mountains.
Then how does he beat Tadej?
Tadej has to get sick or leave the race or one of those options. Basically, it's going to be really hard for Visma to.
We saw last year he had a strategy where he sent Wout up the road, and then Wout helped him for a period of time and did all sorts of stuff. But Wout's now gone as well. Like Wout didn't start the race, so
yeah.
I mean, we both picked Tadej to win this thing. I don't think either of us would be surprised by that. I don't think that's a hot take, but it must be very frustrating being. Jonas is no slouch. He's won the Tour before. It must be frustrating turning up and just being like, there's nothing I can do here. I just got to wait and make sure and hope this guy crashes or something.
No, that's not his mindset. His mindset is he believes he can win. He really believes he can win.
Because there's no foreseeable way to there's no way that I can foresee this happening unless you've made the point. Tadej's sick or crashes or something.
There are opportunities. Sometimes the race gives you opportunities and they have to be prepared when that comes. They will have a plan to try they will target certain stages. And the chance of success is maybe less than 10%, maybe less than 20. But you still have to put when you are one of the race favorites, you have to put yourself in the position to win and try. You cannot be racing for second, even though second is still valuable, but second isn't as valuable when you're a former winner of the race. But yeah, it's going to be really hard to beat
No,
Tadej. So good luck to Visma.
I agree with that. And I think that, Christian Hugenhaug spoke to us about this. Like, you want to compete and you want to risk that, and you have to be willing to be willing to lose when you're risking things, right? That's You can't play defensive, particularly not at Jonas' stage of his career. Like someone like Paul Sextus can't afford to play conservative. He doesn't have to win this. Getting even third for him is a huge achievement. And so, but you only get so many of those. At some point, you're in the middle of your career and you should be winning. You can't be coming second anymore.
But it is interesting that Tade and Jonas, they're 7 minutes down on the yellow jersey now. So it's going to make for an interesting race. It's not time they're going to claw back very quickly. I think they're only going to claw back all of that time back towards this end of the second week, the beginning of the third week only. They'll claw it back in bits as the mountain.
Is that because of the way the tour is set up from a stage perspective, or because of the duration? Because third week is where the tour was won historically, just from those are when better riders ride better. But are you talking about the stages as well from a mountain perspective?
The stage from a mountain perspective, but also who has the yellow jersey. Like Tristan is no slouch. Like he's not going to stay with these guys in the high mountains, but he's not going to lose 7 minutes in one stage, is what I'm referring to. He'll lose 2 minutes here, 3 minutes there. So it's going to take multiple stages.
Got it.
And he's certainly not going to lose any time to them on the rolling stages. So.
And certainly one of the things to a counterpoint of Tade being so much better is that Tade and Jonas are on the same time, and Tade's got a bunch of bonus seconds. So technically Jonas has been a touch quicker than him. So
yeah.
For whatever that's worth.
But man, that stage that El Toro won, wow, it's incredible for Tade to do that to him. But also the fact that fair play to Visma, actually. I'm not sure if you saw this on the socials. Del Toro had a mechanical, and the UAE car passed him. Didn't see him. He was screaming on the radio, and they did not see him.
I did see this. They thought he was a fan.
Exactly. And the Visma car stopped to help him. The Visma mechanic stopped to help him. So fair play to them, man. Really great.
That is great.
Okay, let's move on to one of the things we wanted to discuss about for a while. I wanted to pick your brain with this, like, the greatest of all time athletes retiring and then returning to their sport. And I think as a lead in, we thought we'd use this opportunity of Serena Williams returning to Wimbledon. And I'm just like, the question I always have is why? Like, what you've achieved everything you've wanted to achieve, and you probably passed your best physically. Why return now? And it's not just Serena. We have seen this before in the past.
We'll talk a few of those examples. I mean, listen, the cynical side of me says commercial opportunities, maybe for her or her husband, so potentially that. She has got a high profile partnership with a GLP-1 agonist company, and she as a result, she lost a bunch of weight, and so maybe that's part of it. Is like, look, I can come back. I was sort of done. Now I can come back because of this. So
it's probably, I wouldn't say even it's part of it. I would say it's a big part of it the way you're framing it.
I mean, I don't want to put words in her mouth. I don't know what it is, but that's certainly a possibility. That don't forget that this is it's a reality. It also wouldn't surprise me if, given that you've got no Alcaraz, and so there's like less superstars at this tennis tournament than there has been for a while, right? So maybe they needed a name. So someone like Wimbledon might have tapped her as well. Again, don't be surprised, because this has dominated the news cycle. So it's that's a huge part of it as well. It's been a big talking point. So, so the commercial side is part of it. There's also these people still think they're good, right? She's probably looking around going like, I could beat that person. They're not that good, right? That's always part of it as well. And we're going to talk about a few of these people that are coming here. But I mean, in terms of just rounding out the Serena story, she lost it in her first match. She tweaked her knee. If you go she lost to the Australian Maya Joint in 3 straight sets. But she had to withdraw from the doubles with Venus because of her knee. But her coach is hinting at her playing again. But if you go have a look at her Instagram, you can see the amount of, I think it was Instagram or maybe it was Twitter. Like, they basically drained a ton of fluid off her knee. So that's not a great sign. It's going to take her a bit of a time to come back from, in terms of being conditioned to then play again. So, but I think, like, physiologically, to your question, like, Father Time's undefeated. There's no question about this. And this manifests more in like heavily physically or physiologically dominated sports, for instance, running, cycling, etc. The one exception that comes to my mind is Anna van der Breggen. So she came back, but that probably speaks to some degree to the depth of women's cycling, or the dearth of depth, the lack of depth in women's cycling, she can still
But
come back
all,
and be pretty competitive.
but also in cycling, Lance Armstrong also came back after retiring, and exactly what you said. He sat on the couch watching the tour, and he's like, "I can still beat these guys. I think I can beat." And he came back and he finished third in the first tour. He came back.
Yeah, it's hard to know. Like, I didn't want to bring Lance up as a thing because, he's obviously come out and admitted to performance enhancing drugs. And it's hard to understand the interaction of those with age and physiology and all those things. So, I did want to leave him out of it a little bit. But one thing with Anna and to some degree Lance as well is like there is a tactical nous they have and a skill of riding in the peloton, which I think is a relevant factor here, similar to some of the reasons that I think in more skill-based sports it's easier to come back, right? So for instance, something like tennis, if Serena loses, firstly, she was the most powerful in the tour for a long time. So she loses a good portion of her power. She still has a dominance there in that respect, but she's also technically very able and more skilled probably because she's had more years. And then certainly tactically is more mature. So you probably have these two, you probably have a one ascending set of skills or one ascending set of attributes and one descending set of attributes or decaying set of attributes. So you're improving your technical, tactical aspects of the sport at all times with more years of experience, whereas your physiological capacities are reducing. So your sweet spot's in the middle somewhere, right? So she was probably most dominant when she was in the, probably in her late 20s, early 30s, where she's still got a lot of those great physical attributes. Whereas maybe earlier in her career, she was overcoming that with more physiological ability, right? She's a bit quicker and she's a bit more powerful when she's, say, in her early to mid 20s than she is when she's in her early to mid 30s, but she's tactically better later. So there's this crossover point that happens, and you hear this from different people in different sports at all times, right? So I think that's an interesting crossover there you have from this young to old. But then I did some research on other people who've made sort of comebacks. And again, I wanted to leave Lance out of it, and we sort of talked about Anna van der Breggen already. But probably the most high-profile one that everyone's coming to mind is Michael Jordan. So he played, obviously, 84 to 93. Then he went and played baseball for a bit, came back, played 95 to 98, and won those three. But then he took some time off and then came back with the Washington Wizards in 2001 to 2003 that everyone sort of ignores, right? That's
I
kind of like
didn't even know if I knew that.
yeah, he came back, played for the Washington Wizards, and was okay, pretty good, but not great. People sort of dismissed those years as the Wizards' years and just said, oh, we ignore that. George Foreman came back after 10 years. Boxing's
Wow.
not a sport you want to come back to from a speed, technical ability, that sort of stuff. Like,
Is that at the same time that the grill was probably getting launched?
I think it was a little bit before that, but not by not by much. Michael Phelps, so he retired after the 2012 Olympics, but then came back and raced in 2014 to 2016. Kim Clijsters, the tennis player, so she went 97 to 2007, and then I think she took some time off for children, then came back, played 2009 to 2012, but then came back and played 2020 to 2022, which is
So
really
it's 8
interesting.
years in
Yeah,
between.
yeah, and then Magic Johnson, obviously pretty high profile case, retired in 92 with his HIV diagnosis and then came back in 96. Again, people don't really remember him coming back. They don't really talk about it. It was probably a step off at that stage. So yeah, that was just some other interesting ones here. But I think it's interesting because I always think about how this affects their legacy. Like Jordan kind of, sometimes they just ignore those years, but like people seem to look at it like they can make you worse. I just don't understand it. Like if effectively we give people credit for unachieved things based on potential versus someone like Jordan where he comes back and like, oh, he wasn't great at the end there. Or like LeBron's still playing like, oh, he's not as great now. It's like, you shouldn't get penalized for going and doing more stuff. Like it should be,
We should make a poll. It should be the poll. The goats coming back, does it tarnish their legacy?
yeah,
Can be the
let's do
poll.
that. We'll put that as a poll this week. So if you're on Spotify, go vote there. And if you aren't on Spotify, feel free to send us a DM with your vote or send us an email with your vote or something like that as well.
The other thing you wanted to touch on was this interesting paper, Six Differences in Marathon Pacing. Analysis of 873,000 Berlin marathon runners reveals men are twice as likely to hit the wall.
Yeah, so I alluded to this earlier with respect to some of the physiology stuff and one of our questions there. So basically, you've already mentioned like 873,000 people were analyzed. There's technically 873,334 finishes. This is between 1999 and 2025. And now that's interesting because that includes the super shoe era. Because I would have postulated that super shoes may have changed this. because they made some of the muscular damage less prevalent, right? But apparently not. Pacing stability is what they use here. So it's quantified using the percentage of slowdown in the second half relative to the first half. So it's basically first half versus second half, and was defined as a deceleration of more than 20%. So was your first half more than 20% faster than your second half, which is a proper blow up. That isn't close. And then they also split the sexes across 5 performance categories from competitive to casual. So competitive was sub 3, advanced was 3 to 330, intermediate was 330 to 4, recreational was 4 to 430, and casual was above 430. Now, of course, those times are slightly better in women's racing than they are in men's, right? So for the same time, you'd be a better women's competitor than a men's competitor. So that is all, you can't be perfect here, but it's interesting. They also looked at fine grain splits of every 5 kilometers, right? So because you'll get those in Berlin. And one thing you note, I've run Berlin Marathon. There is a tiny little bump. I wouldn't call it a hill. There is a little bump, but it is for the most part a flat race. That bump is at like the 30-something K mark. So it is in the second half, but it's not enough to make a meaningful difference in your pacing. And if it is, you've cooked it. So unsurprisingly, and we sort of buried the lead with the title of the paper here, but male runners exhibited significantly greater deceleration. On average, this was 10%, whereas women's average was 8%, right? And that's very significant. So that's, sorry?
What do you mean? Explain that to me.
So on average, men were 10% slower in the second half than the first half, and on average, women were 8% slower.
Okay.
So everybody's positively splitting on average, but men more so than women by about a quarter, right? Then there's the hitting the wall, and men are double as likely. So that was 17% compared to 9.6%. 17.6 versus 9.6%. So that is if you slow down more than 20%, right? So on average, men slow down more, and they have bigger slowdowns more often, right?
I was going to say, how much does male ego play in that? But I see you've got it as a bullet point coming up later on. So let's wait.
Correct. The risk of disparity widened amongst the faster runners. So in the competitive category, male runners were approximately 6 times more likely to experience a catastrophic deceleration, which is a proper blow up. Which they in that category of people, and these are experienced people. If you're running sub 3, you know what you're doing for the most part. So men were 6 times more likely at 1.42% versus 0.23% to have a catastrophic, so slowing down more than 20%. And that gap was stable, which is what I said before about the super shoes thing, across the 27-year archive, which is crazy. So looking at this, if you look here, I wanted to talk about this. So the hit the wall rate is much higher in the slower runners. So hit the wall rate in 4 hours 30 or above is 41%. In the 4 to 4:30 is 18%. In the intermediate, which is 3:30 to 4 hours, is 8%. In the advanced, which is 3 to 3:30, it is 4.6%. And then in the fastest, the competitive, it's 1.42 plus or minus. Sorry, no. Let me get that back. Those are all men's numbers, and in women's numbers, so it's 40 in the slowest ones, casuals, it's 41 in men and 17 in women. In the recreationals, it's 18 in men, 4 in women. In the intermediates, 8 versus 1.5%. In the advanced, it's 4.6 versus 0.8. And in the competitive, as we mentioned before, it's 1.42 versus 0.23. So basically, men are worse, and the slower men are, the worse they are as well, is my take home here. For the most.
Because they don't accept being slow, so they start the race too fast, probably.
Yeah, I think there's a huge ego component to this that we've certainly talked about. I think there's probably, there's probably some physiology here too, but I think certainly a good portion of it is ego. I certainly know as well, talking to women, they tend to prepare a little bit better. They tend to think they need to do a little bit more. And seems, I don't like generalizing for anybody, whether it's positive or negative or anything like that. But in my experience, they're a little bit less certain of their ability, a little bit more keen to be a little bit more prepared is what I would say. And then probably pace it a little bit better as well. They seem to be, generally that seems to be the case in my experience across different endurance sports.
Right, we're coming to the end of this episode. Before we do, anyone in the doctor's office this week? Wasn't Keely Hodgkinson in the doctor's office a week or 2 ago?
Yeah, well,
she's come back for another visit.
She has. So just before flying to the States for the Prefontaine meet, she fell on a warm down jog. She cut both of her knees open. So if you watch the race, you'll see she had this weird kinesio tape on to try and help with the swelling. Supposedly she needs stitches, but she just didn't get them, which I don't know. Like, that sounds a bit fishy to me. But anyway, so she strapped up. I couldn't run a few days prior to this. So she didn't run well. So this was interesting. Like, knees are a very small compartment. If you get swelling, it is painful, and the legs don't work super well. The muscles around it as well, especially when you're a fine-tuned athlete. So it doesn't surprise me she didn't run well. But then, her post-race interview, she sounded like she was really down on confidence. And we talked about this a little bit when she was here previously with the hamstring. I was like, I wonder what role Audrey Guerrero running so well is playing on this, and her like pressure to run this record. And she's a little bit down on confidence. So let's see. I mean, she's got Commonwealth Games coming up in Birmingham, which is right near where she's from. So there'll certainly be that. And then the Ultimate Championships as well. She's got London Diamond League coming up as well. So yeah, there's a lot on for poor Keely. So let's see how she goes. So fingers crossed she comes good there. But then also in the discus, one of my favorite athletes, Mykolas Alekna, is a discus thrower. He's from Lithuania originally. He competes for the University of Oregon, so he's wearing his University of Oregon singlet, which is really cool to see that. But he's a world record holder. So he's thrown 75 56. And we talked before, discus is very intriguing to me because you get all shapes and sizes. You got Che, his key, I think he's from the Czech Republic. He's the key competitor. This guy's like, he's like 6'6" or something. He's enormous. And Alekna's like, seems to me to be closer to 6 foot, maybe even under. So like a lot different size and different weight. So he's, Alekna's the world champ silver medalist, the Olympic silver medalist, and he's a diamond leg winner from last year. And as I said, the world record holder. But he tore his pec in March, and the pec is a key part of throwing the discus. But he came back and won the Diamond League. So it's amazing, the recovery. But he's also 24. So yeah, to be 24 and recover like that again.
Yeah.
And then the last one, Jordan Henderson, poor bloke. He jumped the advertising boards after England's win in the World Cup and broke his wrist. So now he needs surgery, which is, poor old Jordan Henderson. So thoughts go out to him.
There's actually a big discussion on his inclusion in the squad because he's coming towards the end of his career now. And I was listening to one of his former teammates at Liverpool, Thiago, giving context for why a manager would include someone like him on the squad, because he's got very, very high standards and he's the kind of player that just keeps everyone else on their toes. So he's not necessarily going to play. He did get some substitute minutes, but he's more there to keep the star players and the up-and-coming talented players in line and make sure like standards are high at all times. So they're going to miss him.
And when you take someone that's not going to play much, you have to take the right person. Like if you took Cole Palmer and he wasn't going to play much, is that a good thing? Like, is he the person you want there not playing? Like, probably not. So I do think that's what building a squad is about, right? It's not about having the best 30 players there. It's about having the best squad there and the best team there. And those things are different, right? Like, you need people who are going to be self-sacrificial and give to the team there and not be cancers in that locker room. So, and then an honorable mention to Harry Kane's voice in his post-match interviews after that game. That was hilarious to hear. So, like, that's, I don't think
I didn't see it. So what happened?
Oh, he sounded like he was going through puberty all over again, the poor guy. It was like super high and squeaky. He sounded like he was going through puberty and inhaled a bunch of helium. It was, go watch the interviews. It's quite funny. So, yeah.
Okay, let's get out of here, man. We drop a new episode every single Friday, and then obviously our weekends are made up of what's happening in the sporting world. Anything you're watching this weekend? I'm in Italy. I'm working at a training camp with some cyclists, so won't have much TV time, unfortunately. But what's on?
Tough life, mate. Barcelona, now Banyoles, then to Italy, then to France. Jeez, mate, must be nice.
Someone has to do it. Someone has to rack up those CO2 miles.
Yeah.
Emissions.
Oh, wow. Mate, I'll watch some more of the rugby. So the State of Origin is kicking off in 10 minutes from now. So I'm not going to get to watch that, but I'll watch that on repeat. I'll watch some more of the Nations Championship rugby. There's a bit of Football World Cup I'll watch. Tour de France is on. I'll catch that. And there's some Diamond League, mate. So I've just got too much sport and not enough time at the moment. It's crazy. So, yeah, we'll see.
Cool. Thanks for putting this together. Hope you enjoyed it. David, thanks so much for producing this. Appreciated. And we'll be back next week, Friday, with a new episode.
Shall do. Take care, mate.